It's Annette Spur here, and I'm chatting today with Carolann Kelleher, the author of The King's Daughter. Now, your story doesn't sound glamorous and royal as you're reading through it. It's quite a heartbreaking story, but I think the title of it will become more obvious as we discuss it further. And so I think starting your story, the start of the book, is in post-World War II London. Do you want to talk a little bit about your childhood growing up in London?
Yes, when I was growing up in London, I can remember back to I was 3 years old, and I remember how we still had ration books and all the food was rationed. Our basic things were eggs and bacon and cheese and butter and sugar. That was all rationed, and we could only get a certain amount each week. But what I remember as a child most of all was that sweets, or lollies as they're called now, were rationed, and very, very few of them ever came into our house. The food coupons was only a few each fortnight, so if you had a large family, it didn't necessarily be able to feed your family, and that was what it was like with us. My mother told me that the government told everyone that cigarettes was a way of calming their nerves, not knowing whether or not the bombs were going to go off again or not. And so everyone smoked, and smoked really badly. As my father was in the army for a while, and they got given free cigarettes. And when he came out of the army, they bought. So lots of money went on cigarettes. And I'm not talking about one packet a day. I'm talking about packets a day.
Right.
Even my grandparents smoked really badly, and alcohol was a big thing to calm their nerves. It seemed that the whole world, the world that I lived in, was on edge. There always was an argument in the street. There was always someone fighting. And I remember even at the age of eight, I saw bombed sites within our street, and we used to play on the bomb sites, but that now causes me distress, because there were people on the bomb sites, and they were killed, and that was exactly opposite where we lived.
Yeah, and this is the environment that you grew up in, and obviously your dad, having been in the military, he was self-prescribing cigarettes and alcohol, and in that situation you found yourself, you were the victim of years of sexual abuse at the hands of your dad, and you also experienced, I guess, the lack of services for people in your situation. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh yes, when I was quite young, I think I was about 7, I went to the local priest and I told him what was happening, and he said to me, now go home, be a good girl, to stop making trouble for your family. And when I was 18, I went I told the police, after my father had beaten me, and I was in hospital, and I told the police what was happening. They said, oh, we don't get involved in domestic issues. And so I had no help whatsoever. But today I think it's a lot better. But it's not good enough, but it's a lot better. There are still children being abused, and people don't know about it. And it ruins their lives, absolutely ruins their lives. But the victims of domestic violence these days, as far as Centrelink is concerned, they're sort of almost hooked by the perpetrator, because Centrelink pays money to the perpetrator, to the abuser, and so the victim is caught up in it, can't leave because they're frightened of not getting any money. They think, live or die, what do I do? So they stay. They don't know how to leave. They don't know how to do it. They don't know where to go. Some people get to a point where they run away. But when you run away, things are not good. People judge you, and people turn around and say, oh, you shouldn't have left your husband, because when you are abused and it's in your husband, then you lose your husband. When it's in your family, you lose your family.
Yeah, and you talk about a big part of your journey too was experiencing shame as a victim of sexual abuse, and that's something that a lot of victims are faced with, and they don't know how to deal with that. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the shame that you experienced?
Yeah, shame is a killer. Believe it or not, shame is a killer. And shame can destroy a person, their self-worth, their confidence, their self-image, and they bring condemnation upon themselves. The shame doesn't seem to ever go away. And the victim blames themselves for everything that happens. When I was 7, a nun told me, because I fainted in church, that I was a bad girl, and that only bad girls faint in church. So I thought for many years it was my fault. I was judged by Christians, and often victims are judged and saying, "Oh, you should have run away," or "it didn't really happen that way," But it does, As I said before, when you're in a position where you're married and you're a victim. If you run away from that, you lose everything. You lose your house, you lose your relationship with your husband, and you don't always want to lose that relationship. Or if it's in the family, you lose your family. That happened to me.
Yeah. And so what would be your advice to somebody that's experiencing abuse in any form in their life, whether it's at the hand of a partner or a parent or a loved one? What would you say to them right now?
Don't stay. Don't stay in that situation. You don't have to stay there. You really don't have to stay there. The longer you stay, the worse it becomes. Seek help. And I know that there's not a lot of help in some areas. But, it's so hard to advise an abused person, someone that's in that situation. All they know is that. And a person's been abused most of their lives, they think that's normal. They don't like it, they don't want it, but they think it's normal. And they think there's no alternative but just to stay there. The choice, as I said before, you lose your family if you say something. And I lost my family because I told someone that, I was being abused. And so my family didn't want to know me anymore. They said it was my fault. And I was a 3-year-old little girl. Whose fault was it? It wasn't mine. I didn't know any better. But when you lose your family, you think you lose everything. But God can bring it back again. God can give you other people, not blood family, but that's what's happened to me. I have a beautiful family. I have so many grandchildren. You wouldn't believe how many grandchildren I've got. And they're not even blood ones. I do have 2 blood ones. But God can bring it back,
Wonderful. And you certainly, through your book, you do talk about how your faith has developed through the awful experiences of your life. And you reference that moment of fainting in the church. And you had actually said to God in your mind, "If you are real, make me faint right here and now." And you did. And so even though the nuns told you, "Well, that's because you're a naughty girl," I think that was probably the real beginning of your faith journey. Would you say that?
It was. I knew that there was a God. But it took me many years to find Jesus Christ. And for many years, I went from church to church to church looking for Jesus. Then somebody told me, "But Jesus is in my heart." And my whole life changed then. But even though my life changed, it took a long time to get through being an abused person. It took a long time to get rid of the past and go for the future. Because
you did do that, and you have an incredible moment in the story where you talk about forgiving your dad. And do you want to talk about how you actually reached that point?
Well, what I did is somebody told me, "You've got to forgive." This beautiful lady named Kay, she told me many years ago to forgive. And I thought, how can I forgive? So I kept saying, "Lord, I forgive him, I forgive him, I forgive him, I forgive him." But it wasn't seeming to be doing any good. Then all of a sudden, something clicked in. It just clicked in. I thought, I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel like anger. I know he was a monster. I know that the alcohol and all those things made him into a monster. And on his deathbed, he asked me to forgive him. It was so easy to say yes. So easy. But if it hadn't been for God, I'm not sure whether I could have done it. But I kept asking God, "Help me, help me, help me."
Why do you think
And
it's so important for victims of abuse to forgive?
if you don't forgive, you never leave the past behind. You never have a future. You can't move on until you forgive. When you forgive, you can take that step forward. You leave the past behind. You can't change the past, but you can leave the past behind and make a much better future.
Yeah. And obviously your book is called The King's Daughter, and as someone that obviously had a really difficult relationship with your own dad, how easy or difficult was it for you to be able to call yourself the King's Daughter?
Well, God told me that I was his daughter. So I am the King's daughter. And anyone that can get through what I got through can actually say, I am the King's daughter. And he has poured so many blessings on me. I just want to tell the world what it's like to come through so much abuse, but still be standing at 73 years old and still a pastor of a church and still a justice of the peace and still a visiting judge. But God has done it all for me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Carolann. And I'll include links to where people can purchase your book online in the comments of the video. So once again, thank you so much, Carolann.
God bless you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.